The Atlanta Braves have more needs this offseason than just shortstop and left field. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today for Thursday, October 17th. Your source of news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. He's Christian Rauh. Follow him on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, R-A-U-H. You can find all of our written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. And we have a Twitter account, a Facebook page, and an Instagram for the show as well. So go out and follow those on all popular social media platforms. And Christian, in the last week or so, right, we've broken down a lot of different things that this team, a lot of different areas to address for this Atlanta Braves team this offseason. We've talked about the need to figure out shortstop, right? You got to fix something. Either fix Orlando Arcia, find competition, find a replacement, something. We've talked about the outfield, how to handle this whole situation with Soler and Ozuna both looking like they're DHs. Do you bring back Ramon Laureano or not? What to do there? We've talked about that. We've talked about the Max Fried situation. Can you afford to re-sign him and things like that? But I think that there are a few more things for us to go over about this team in this offseason. And real quick, on that Soler Ozuna thing, we're going to come in. There's a great suggestion came from a YouTube comment. We're going to do a show tomorrow about, do you trade Marcell Ozuna or do you trade Jorge Soler? Because we've seen arguments for both. I'm going to take one side. Christian's going to take the other. We're going to lay out the cases to trade that specific guy, and we're going to let y'all vote on who the winner is. We'll talk about that on Monday. We'll unveil the winner on Monday after a weekend of polls on the social media platforms. But I want to talk about other needs for this team, Christian, because we haven't really gotten into the pitching. Other than the Max Fried show, we haven't done a show entirely about the pitching and the pitching needs. And I feel like you probably have a couple places, both the rotation and the bullpen, where you're going to have to do some work. From where we sit right now, which do you think is more important for us to address, the rotation or the bullpen?
I think you have to lean towards the rotation a little bit just because you don't know the status of Max Fried. And although you've had a fantastic year of Chris Sale, he's getting older in age. So you don't know how great year 2 under the system is going to be under him. And I know that's tough to hear after a Cy Young potential season. But I think the rotation is where it's at there. And then you obviously have some young guys who can step up and do the role. But I think if you want to make the right step forward, get back to the way that you are expecting to get in 2021, not just falling in the wild card round, making a farther run. And obviously you don't know the full status of Spencer Strider in 2025. I think you have to lean towards building up the rotation just a little bit more. And I think free agency is a good spot for that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's do that first. This is something, I think the lesson that we've taken from 2021 through now is you can never have enough starting pitching. Atlanta's used somewhere between 10 and 13 conventional starters every single year, right? You use 13 starters this year. Like even in the World Series year, you had bullpen games in the World Series. Dylan Lee started a World Series game for you. So you're in a situation where, one, you can never have enough starting pitchers, period. And then you can never have enough starting pitching options that are postseason caliber. Starting pitching first. Looking at the 40-man roster right now, excluding the guys who we have questions or not about whether they'll come back. So Charlie Morton is a free agent. He could retire. He'll be 41, I think, next month. Max Fried, free agent. We've broken this down. We don't expect him to be back. So when you take those guys out, I see, as of right now, 9 potential starters in the 2025 season, even if they're not already on opening day, right? Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Ronaldo Lopez. We know all 3 of those guys are expected to be healthy on opening day. Spencer Strider will be in that group. We just don't know exactly when. And a reminder, Alex Anthopoulos told us for both him and Ronald Acuna Jr., We don't know exactly when they'll be ready because we're just so far away from spring. Every month that goes by, we'll get more information. When they report for spring training in February, we'll have a much better idea of when they will be ready to go. And he said it could be early May, could be late May, could be June before we see them. He just said that to cover his bases because, again, we don't know where they'll be when they come in. So Strider is expected to be in the rotation next year. We just don't know when he will make his debut and what condition he'll be in. But outside of those guys, Grant Holmes is being stretched out as a starter this offseason. I expect him, again, barring some sort of health thing, to be available on opening day. Ian Anderson is expected to be ready. AJ Smith-Shawver. Hurston Waldrop is probably a rotation option at some point in time next year. He started for you last year. Odds are he'll be able to start for you next year too. And Bryce Elder. As much as people don't like Bryce Elder, there is still a role for a stinker slider ground ball guy when they're on to be a fifth starter or a sixth starter, whatever, and give you 5 or 6 innings once a week. There is a role for that guy. They're not just going to kick him to the curb. I do think Alan Winans, Dylan Dodd, guys like that don't have a future starting in Atlanta. Huascar, is the big wild card here. But given that it's just 9 starters right now, and we know that we've used between 10 and 13 every season in the last, again, look at the last 4, how aggressive do you think the Braves need to be in free agency to add at least one guy to that group?
Yeah, I think pretty aggressive. I would even lean towards 2 if you can't get a top end guy in free agency. And when I think of top end, I'm talking about Freeds, Snells, people like that. If you can't bring in one of those, if it doesn't work out money wise, or you're not willing to pay that type of contract, then I think if you can get it by committee and get 2, then I think that would be huge. We talked
Mhm.
about having depth and needs for starting pitching all season long because of the injuries. We use so many starting pitchers. You mentioned there's some times where you brought in some guys that were eventually DFA'd later on that started a couple games for the Braves this year. If you could find a few good players, and I think this might even be the better route if you can't land Max Fried, if you can find a couple good players that aren't super expensive, that if you combine the 2 contracts, it probably equals out or even is still less than Max Fried. One
Mhm.
might be a project that could be an interesting thing for them, especially if you're going to sit them towards the bottom of your rotation. So I think there's some interesting paths that the Braves could take this offseason.
Yeah. All right. Let's look at some of these options here. Full disclosure on this, we don't know, obviously, about everybody. Some potential free agents have opt outs that haven't been exercised, player options, club options, all that stuff. Like, for instance, Freddie Peralta has a club option. I'm going to assume that's getting picked up, right? But there's some things. Blake Snell is probably going to opt out. Even if Blake Snell opts out, I don't think Atlanta's going to sign Blake Snell. Look at how much money he made. Again, we talked about this the other day. $22 million is the most any Braves player has signed a multi-year deal for under Alex Anthopoulos. And the only time they went over that on a deal was a 1-year deal for Josh Donaldson for 2019. And that was only $23 million. So Corbin Burns, probably not in the cards, right? Blake Snell, probably not in the cards. The only player I think that Atlanta would go over that $22 million for would be to bring back Max Fried. He's probably the only one because Max Fried, we talked about this last week, and despite going on the IL every year, he's also been one of only, I think the number I had in that show was like 17 or 18 pitchers to pitch as many innings as he has in the last 3 or 4 seasons. And he's the only one he's like the second best ERA in that span, just behind Garrett Cole. So there are, I think if you're looking at those top end guys, there are some interesting guys that you would hope would be in Atlanta's price range. I feel like Atlanta's to go get one of those mid 30s veterans every so often. Some of them have worked out. Charlie Morton obviously worked out. Cole Hamels did not work out, right? Yusei Kikuchi, 34 years old. I think he put up 6 WAR, which is holy cow. Now, granted, that was last 2 years, 23 and 24 combined. He put up 6 WAR, but got traded this year from the Blue Jays to the Astros. I think he could be a guy that, with some tweaks, Atlanta could turn him into a playoff caliber kind of guy. To me, the ultimate high ceiling, maybe low floor guy is Nick Pivetta of the Boston Red Sox. 32 years old. You've got some time there. He's been very homer prone in his career. It has not been good. But again, that's something, if you can fix Nick Pivetta's homer issues. Again, his his ERA 4.04 last year, 4.14 this year. His fielded independent pitching was better than that in both seasons. We talked about this yesterday. That's a thing Atlanta likes to go find guys who have underperformed in other places. This all comes down to his homer rate is career 4%. It was 4.7 this year. MLB average by perspective is just over 3%. If you can get him down to a below average homer rate, I think he could be a dude. In 2020 with Boston, below average homer rate, he put up a 1.80 ERA. Short season, mind you, didn't make very many starts. I think he only had 5 appearances that year. But the point is, dude can be good if you can cut down the homers. I think there's options here if you want to give the Fried and or the Morton money to another veteran to come be in the back end of your rotation.
Yeah, I agree with you. I like the Kikuchi pick, by the way. According to Spot Track, if they are going to sign him, a lot of people are thinking that he's market valued around 1 year for about $15 million. Not a bad little pickup if you could put him towards the back of your rotation. He's a guy that, if he gets hot, could easily start a postseason game and you'd feel okay with. It's not a Bryce Elder starting a postseason game. So that's something big. I like the Pavetta pick as well. He's not on my radar, but the other two on this one, and Kikuchi was on this list as well. I think we have to mention Walker Buehler. I think we have to, because he could be considered a project piece for sure. He hasn't had the best season, especially since he's came back from injury. But a Vanderbilt kid, that's always a good thing. But if you could give him a shot at trying to return from his injury and give him a chance, a prove it deal, this is a perfect place for him to do it in the back of the rotation with a really good pitching staff. You could probably get him pretty cheap. Spot Track has got him as a 1-year prove it deal for about $4 million. If you could give him, I think there's actually going to be a little bit of competition for him to have a prove it deal this year, this offseason. So if you could give him maybe a 2-year, $10 million contract, or maybe a 1-year, $5 or $6 million with a potential player option, I think you might be able to get him over to Atlanta. Walker Buehler could be a really good one. I'm going to get your thoughts on that one before I give you my final one.
Yeah, one of the things with Buehler, I do think he'll be more than that simply because of the potential if he can come back. Remember, this is a guy that 2-time All-Star, 2-time Cy Young finisher, 4th place in 21, went 16-4 with a 2.47 ERA, led baseball in starts with 33, 14-4 with a 3.26 in 2019. So has been really good in his prime before the injuries. His start last night was pretty good. And then also, Atlanta doesn't give out player options. They'll do a club option with a buyout on it, but they don't do player options. And I honestly, as somebody who covers the team and likes to make a spreadsheet and have all of that financial stuff, I love that Atlanta doesn't do the weird incentive deals or vesting options. It's just, here's the deal. We'll throw a club option on there. We're not going to give you all the weird stuff. I do think he'll cost more than that, but I'm not opposed to the concept of taking a Walker Buehler and saying, hey, we'll give you 20 for 2. We'll give you a 1-year deal for 10 with a club option attached at $20 million if you perform well. And so it's something where he gets time to work things out. If it works, if he goes well, Atlanta can keep him at Charlie Morton money. And if not, he can go enter free agency at 31. Even if they pick up the option, he enters free agency at 32. He still has time for a big payday. I think you could make a Walker Buehler acquisition work. He's not a Boris guy, which I love. You mentioned he's a Vanderbilt guy. The Southern guys love Atlanta. I just worry that somebody's going to throw stupid money at him. And by somebody, the Dodgers, because they have stupid money. But I don't hate the Walker Buehler.
I think Walker Buehler and Dodgers are done, regardless of how good he does the rest of the postseason. I think they're going to test their money, their market somewhere else.
I think they did get mad that he left. Was he the one that left the team and went to go? He worked in Florida or something versus. Okay, it was somebody, but yeah, I could see them also just wanting to wash their hands of this and move on. I do think Walker Buehler is a candidate to have a better slider than he does. It
Yes.
doesn't get a lot of movement on it. It's really, to me, it's really like a cutter more so than a slider. Give him that Spencer Strider gyro ball. I think would be a great addition. You get that sweeper and the slider, the curve ball, the changeup, the fastball, which looked good last night as far as the movement. He didn't control it well, but the movement looked good. Think he could be a dude for one of those Atlanta reclamation project things. I'm into Walker Buehler. I like that suggestion. What's the other one? And then we'll go to break.
This one to me, I think could be the Charlie Morton replacement piece. And I think
Okay.
this one would fit really well already in the Braves pitching staff. I think he's very underrated because he dealt with an injury, but before that injury, he was really good. Washington Nationals, Trevor Williams. I thought Trevor Williams had a great season last year. When before he got injured, before he got hurt, he pitched in 11 starts, 2.22 ERA across 56 innings. He looked very good. He wound up was injured for the majority of the summer, came back towards the end, looked like he never lost a step, had a .90 ERA in the last two starts across his last 10 innings of work with the Nationals. He's not too expensive either. He was working on a $6.5 million contract with the Nationals. He's entering his age 33 season. So if you can get him for a couple years for about
Three or
15,
three,
16 million
three or
dollars.
4 year deal. Yeah.
I like the Trevor Williams piece. He seems like the Charlie Morton replacement piece in my mind.
He's going to piss a lot of people off because his
Yeah.
fastball doesn't break 90 miles an hour a ton. But the actual stuff he does, four seamer, sweeper, change, I think slider and a sinker. So, like, he can be your sinker slider guy in pitch to contact. He has a good ground ball rate. It's above average, right?
Also not a Boris
Um,
guy.
Also not a Boris guy. Neither him or Bueller are Boris guys. That always helps. Boris wouldn't want him anyway. But he could go four-seam sweeper and get whiffs. I do think he'd be a candidate to add a curveball. If you can give a curveball to Trevor Williams so he has something that breaks below the zone, because everything of his, this is frustrating. This is the thing that just personally frustrates me. Sinkers don't really sink that much. Two seamers are the ones that vertically drop, usually below the zone. A lot of sinkers just run back to the arm side. They don't really drop. And that you hear sinkers and you think it's going to go down in the zone. It really doesn't. Two seamers are the ones that do that. And so everything of his stays on the plane or above. Nothing drops below. You give him a curveball. Yes, the velo is going to be a concern. Despite that velo concern, his fastball performed well this year. I was pulling it up as you were putting it in. Average fastball velo of 89 miles an hour, 196 batting average against, slugging of 271. It doesn't go very fast. He gets amazing extension on it, and dudes just don't hit it. So I don't hate the Trevor Williams pick, and I think that's a good throw him in the back end. He can be a 5 if you can get him, again, give him that curveball, get some improvements out of him. He could be a potential postseason guy. And if not, he's a long relief in the postseason, but he's not going to be very expensive. You could probably do him on a, like you said, a 2 or 3 year deal, not a ton of money, and have a dude who could just take a lot of innings. I like that choice.
Biggest issue is in 2023 when he had a full season of work. He pitched 144 innings. That was great. Don't get me wrong. But he also let up 34 home runs. Yes, that was a lot of home runs. But he
Yeah.
seemed like that changed in his 66 innings of work because of that injury. He only had 66 innings of work in this one. He only allowed 3. And that's a big difference, big change. His looked like his stuff changed a little bit. 2.03 ERA in 2024, and that's
Mhm.
even with a 2.79 FIP. So the FIP is a little higher, but still not anything concerning. I think he'd be a nice piece. Like I said, I think he's like Charlie Morton light in this essence. So I think he'd be a nice addition to Atlanta.
Yeah. I went back and pulled his fastball velo has been a little bit better. It still hasn't been amazing, but it has been better in previous years. The injury may have something to do with that. He did also throw a curveball in the past. He wasn't very good. He didn't use it a lot. I do think Atlanta's pretty decent at fixing those curveballs. I can see them fixing that. But no, I like the Trevor Williams pick. In just a minute, we'll get into some other pitching issues. I think you got to find a lefty reliever in the pen. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Lindsay, Crosby, Christian Rauh. Again, find all of our written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack. We are talking about pitching needs for the Atlanta Braves. We went through some starting pitcher options that we like. I threw out Nick Pivetta, Yusei Kikuchi. Christian threw out Walker Buehler and Trevor Williams, some guys we like. I do want to get to the bullpen, though, because And I broke this down in the 40-man roster preview earlier this week. Again, bravetoday.com. Right now, your bullpen looks to be, for a fact, these 6 guys are in there. Raisel Iglesias, Joe Jimenez, Pierce Johnson, Aaron Bummer. They're all signed long-term. Dylan Lee, arbitration eligible. He's getting a contract. Daisabel Hernandez, league minimum. He showed you late in the year in the postseason you can trust him. And then after that, I do think John Brebbia comes back. We expect Jesse Chavez to retire. Luke Jackson's not getting that option picked up. He was not good enough to spend that kind of money on him. Angel Perdomo will be back at some point in time from that Tommy John. He's due back sometime this year. The real questions come down to AJ Minter. He is a free agent this year. Obviously, he missed the end of the year with that hip surgery. But I think you saw last year and also a little bit this year after Minter went down, only having 2 lefties in the pen is not enough. Okay. You have Aaron Bummer, you have Dylan Lee. I have been screaming at the top of my lungs to use Aaron Bummer more in more significant leverage situations than they've been willing to do. They just haven't really trusted him, and he generates the ground balls. Now, this team hasn't always converted those ground balls, right? They've not always gotten the outs on the ground balls, but he's done his part and gotten the ground balls. But even then, Dylan Lee is going to go into that Minter set up one of those 3 or 4 back end high leverage roles, the setup guy. You still need another lefty. And Tyler Matzik is still in the organization. After you traded him in the Luke Jackson, Jorge Soler deal to the Giants, they released him. He signed a minor league deal with Atlanta. He lives in Atlanta. His family lives here. I would expect him to be back on a minor league deal in 25. Maybe he works back into form and he is the lefty in the pen. If not, dude should never have to buy a beer in Atlanta the rest of his life for what he did in that NLCS against the Dodgers. I go back like once a month and just watch that inning because damn, it's fun to do. You've got other options in the system for a lefty. Hayden Harris, undrafted free agent in the 2022. He made it to AAA this year. Want to say he threw 22 innings or so in AAA. He started off in AA, AAA. Doesn't have a ton of velocity, but he gets really good extension, and it's deceptive as hell. I was talking to some folks at spring training. He pitched an inning. I was talking to some of the beat. We were just waiting outside the clubhouse I think it was for Charlie Morton or somebody. And we were just we don't understand how dudes can't hit Hayden Harris, but they can't hit Hayden Harris. They can't see his stuff and they can't hit it. But the velocity's not really there. So he's in the AFL right now. I love his potential. I've spoken to him personally. He's a great kid. I don't know if they are comfortable putting him in the bullpen right away next year. Dylan Dodd has been working as a reliever, another lefty, not great velocity. He was on the 40-man roster. They didn't want to use him at all in the majors this year. He pitched in relief in Gwinnett the entire month of August. He is probably either 5th in the pecking order as starters in Gwinnett, or he is going to be a reliever. You got to find a lefty. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know if there's anybody in the organization except maybe Tyler Matzik who can be that guy. And the last thing that they're going to do is go into spring training with only one option. So am I just off base and thinking 2 lefties is not enough? Or is it clear they're going to go out and get somebody? We just might not know who it's going to be yet.
No, I think they'll definitely go out and get somebody. I think we're going to see a couple names come in from the bullpen and some names that we've heard of. I think that there's a pretty decent market for relievers this year. And a lot of them are some decent veteran names that I could totally see the Braves going for. And none of them they can be high leverage guys, but I don't think they have to, because I think you have that secured. I think you have some decent high leverage guys, in the back of your bullpen already for the Braves. So you just need to fill the pieces around it. I like 2 lefties. There's 2 lefties. There's a lot of righties that I really like. And we can definitely get into that another day or whenever you want to, but there are 2 lefties that I like right off the bat. And one of them is Brent Suter. I think Brent Suter would be a really good piece from the Cincinnati Reds. The last couple seasons, when he was with Colorado and Milwaukee, he stayed around the 3 ERA. He gives you about 60 to 70 innings every season. He has acted as an opener. He's acted as a middle relief guy. He's even played some in the late innings as well. I think he got his first career save, or it was only his second career save this season.
Yeah.
But I think he would be a nice piece for the Braves, good left-handed piece. And then I think you always have to just put into context. I'm not as high on this one, but when you look at the name, I think it's out there as well. Aroldis Chapman's still there, Lindsay. Left-handed Aroldis Chapman. And he had a decent season with Pittsburgh. You can probably get him on a one piece. Just having that flame-throwing option coming out, especially if you got a guy like Hernandez as well in the pen as well. I think that could be a really fun addition for Atlanta. But I like Brent Suter. He's like my number one priority for a lefty if I'm going to take a free agent reliever.
My big concern about Suter is his club option for 25 is $3.5 million. His buyout's 500,000. It feels like they're going to pick that up because he doesn't get a lot of punch outs, which is fine because exit velocity 94th percentile, hard hit rate 96th percentile. He does not get hit around. So I think that I would love Suter. I don't think he'd be expensive. I do worry they're going to pick up that option, especially because you don't want to sign a guy to a multi-year at age 35. I'm intrigued by Chapman. I think Chapman might be a fallback guy if they can't get a higher quality starter. They just say, we're going to beef up the pen. We're going to throw some fire in there. I do think this team's not been afraid to use lefties as closers. Look at the Will Smith era. As much as folks hated the Will Smith era, he did not blow a save in the postseason. He was nails in the 21 postseason. Also, that World Series dream is dead. He did 3 straight World Series championships. The Royals got eliminated, so that dream is dead.
If the Dodgers win the World Series, Will Smith will technically still win
with
the World
a with a Will Smith on the roster. Last year of Raisel Iglesias on a contract, I could also see, again, if you don't make a big expenditure for starting pitcher, I could see going after Tanner Scott. Just turned 30, start of last year, 150 innings, ERA's barely over 2, 31% strikeout rate, big velo. I think he's going to be out of their price range, but I could see them going for somebody like I don't know, Caleb Ferguson's going to be just one of those interchangeable lefties from the Dodgers. Again, Matzek is a guy you're trying to get back here. Jolie
What
Rodriguez.
about Clay Holmes?
He's blown so many saves. I worry that if something happens and you've got to have a guy step up into a higher role, he just won't be able to do it. He's blown so many. He's like the MLB leader in blown saves the last 2 years. I worry that's going to scare some teams off. Matt Moore is an older veteran, maybe. I'm trying to think here. Ryan Yarbrough. I've always liked Ryan Yarbrough stuff. I think he could be a spot starter if you need him. I know you like his heritage there. I think an underrated guy that you might see, Danny Coulombe of the Orioles.
He's got an option though, right?
I don't think so. No, he was on a minor league deal with the Twins for 4 straight years, triggered an assignment clause, and got traded to the Orioles before the season started. So a minor league deal usually doesn't have a club option on it. But like 2.59 ERA in the last 2 seasons, almost 30% strikeout rate, walk rate just over 5%. I think he'd be another interesting lefty veteran. Let us know who you want to see, both starters and relievers. Lots of options out there. And again, tomorrow, Christian and I are going to sit down and we're each going to take one side of do you trade Jorge Soler or Marcell Ozuna? It's going to be tons of fun. And then we're going to let you vote on who wins and who should go. In the meantime, if you're listening on audio or on YouTube, do us a favor. Leave us a 5-star review. It really does help folks discover the show, gets the algorithms to share us to more people. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Christian S. Rauh, Rauh. Follow me on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. The show is on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram as well, and our written work, bravestoday.com. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.